Let's talk about the most dangerous minute in aviation. It's that incredibly intense moment of transition, going from a ground vehicle to a flying machine. And it is absolutely packed with risk. In this explainer, we are going to dive deep into the physics, the procedures, and the pure skill it takes to master the takeoff. So let's just start with a number that really sets the stage, 20%. According to the FAA, that's how many general aviation accidents happen during the takeoff phase. And get this, over half of those are blamed on pilot error. It's a tiny, tiny fraction of your total flight time, but man, it is loaded with risk. So why is that? What makes this one brief moment so disproportionately dangerous? Well, it's this unique combination of things. You're at maximum power, you're at a low altitude, and you have low airspeed. That deadly trio leaves you with practically zero margin for error. Let's break down what makes it so demanding. To really get what can go wrong, first, we've got to understand what right looks like. So we're going to start with the baseline, the foundation for everything else, the normal takeoff. This is the procedure every single pilot masters, and it's done into the wind on a good runway with no obstacles in the way. Now, even though it feels like one single continuous motion, a takeoff is actually broken down into three really distinct phases. You've got the takeoff roll, which happens on the ground, then liftoff, that's the magic moment the wheels leave the pavement, and finally, the initial climb, where you're establishing a safe ascent away from the ground. Each part has its own unique challenges. The takeoff roll, it all starts with the plane perfectly aligned on that center line. The pilot smoothly, and I mean smoothly, no sudden jerks, applies full power. And right away, they're on the rudder pedals, not the brakes, to keep the plane straight. See, as the plane picks up speed, engine torque tries to pull the nose to the left, and the pilot has to actively push back. This is the moment you can literally feel the flight controls come alive, gaining more and more authority with every bit of speed. You know, there's a fantastic line in the FAA's handbook that says at this point, the airplane is being flown more than it is being taxied. And that just perfectly captures this transition, right? The wheels are still on the ground, but make no mistake, the pilot is actively flying the aircraft. Okay, so once the plane hits a very specific speed, we call it rotation speed, it's time for liftoff. Now, this isn't about yanking the plane into the air, not at all. It's a smooth, gentle back pressure on the controls to raise the nose to just the right takeoff attitude. And if you do it right, the airplane literally flies itself right off the runway. Trying to force it into the air too early, that's a classic and really dangerous mistake. All right, you're airborne. Now the mission changes completely. First thing, you confirm a positive rate of climb. You have to be sure you're actually going up. Then the pilot lets the plane accelerate to VY, or best rate of climb speed. This gets you the most altitude in the shortest amount of time. Only then, once you're climbing away, do you retract the landing gear and flaps. And all the while, you're keeping the plane lined up with the runway to stay clear of any obstacles. So what this all shows is that precision is absolutely everything. These seemingly small mistakes, like jamming the throttle forward or pulling back too early or not using enough rudder, they can instantly destabilize the aircraft. Each one of them messes with that delicate balance of forces right when the plane is at its most vulnerable. But of course, the real world isn't always perfect, right? Not every takeoff is a normal one. Pilots have to constantly adapt their technique to deal with things like crosswinds or tricky runway surfaces. This is really where that basic procedure evolves into advanced skill. So what happens when a wind isn't playing nice and it's hitting you from the side? Well, in a crosswind, the pilot adds a totally new input, aileron pressure into the wind. What this does is it raises the aileron on the upwind wing, creating a downward force that keeps the wind from lifting that wing up too early. It's this constant balancing act, rudder to stay straight and aileron to keep the wings level. Now, beyond the wind, there's this invisible force that every pilot has to deal with near the runway. It's called ground effect. Basically, when an airplane is flying within one wingspan of the surface, the air underneath the wings gets compressed. This reduces drag, and it makes the plane feel way more efficient. It's like riding on a cushion of air, which can be both a help and a real hindrance. And therein lies the danger. Ground effect can totally trick a pilot. The plane feels like it's ready to fly, and it might even lift off early. But as soon as it tries to climb out of that air cushion, drag suddenly spikes. If you don't have enough airspeed, you just can't climb. The plane just kind of mushes along, struggling to get over any obstacles. So how do pilots handle a runway that's way too short or maybe isn't even paved?
This is where maximum performance takeoffs come in. These are techniques designed to push the airplane to its absolute operational limits to get the job done.
To do this, you have to understand two critical speeds. We already talked about Vy, which gets you high the fastest. But there's also Vx, or best angle of climb. This one gives you the most altitude over the shortest horizontal distance. Think of it like this. Vy is the express elevator up, but Vx is the steepest possible escalator to get you over a tall tree right at the end of the runway. And these two challenges, a short field versus a soft field, they require completely opposite strategies. On a short field, your enemy is an obstacle at the end, so you stay on the ground longer to build up speed for that super steep climb. But on a soft field, like grass or mud, the ground itself is the enemy. There, the goal is to get the wheels unstuck as soon as possible, fly in ground effect to build speed, and only then try to climb away. The errors you can make here are really specific, and they have very high consequences. If you lift off too early on that short field takeoff, you just won't have the energy to make that steep climb. And on a soft field, if you try to climb out of ground effect before you've built up enough speed, the airplane can just settle right back down onto the runway. Not good. Well, what happens when the plan just goes wrong? A well-trained pilot always has an escape plan. Knowing when and how to hit the abort button is one of the most important skills in all of aviation. If something goes wrong on the ground, an engine sputters, a door pops open, anything, that decision to abort has to be instant. The procedure is decisive and it's fast. Power comes immediately to idle, you slam on the brakes as hard as you can, and you use that rudder to keep the plane straight on the runway. There is zero hesitation. And there it is. That's the scenario every pilot trains for, but truly hopes to never, ever face. You are airborne, but you're low, you're slow, and suddenly you have no engine. What do you do? The first, the most important, the absolute #1 rule is this: fly the airplane. Before you try to fix anything, before you call for help, you must maintain control of the aircraft. Panic is the enemy, procedure is your only salvation. This procedure is drilled into every pilot until it's muscle memory. You immediately lower the nose to maintain airspeed and prevent a stall. You establish a controlled glide, and then, the hardest rule to follow, you land somewhere ahead of you. That temptation to try and turn back to the safety of the runway is incredibly powerful, but it's a low-altitude, low-energy turn that has tragically led to countless accidents. You just can't do it. The FAA puts the reality of this situation very starkly. They say the pilot has only a few seconds to decide. There is no time for a debate. There is no time to think it over. It is simply assess, decide, and act. And this is exactly why these procedures aren't just learned. They're drilled until they become instinct. So, as we wrap up, we come right back to our original question. A takeoff is so much more than just pushing a throttle forward. It is a calculated, dynamic, and incredibly precise sequence where a pilot has to manage power, aerodynamics, and procedure, all in the most critical phase of flight. It's really a testament to the skill and precision that makes aviation work.